exciting time of year, not just for. I mean, look, it's always great when the players come back. There's always some more juice and energy in the building. It's always great to get them back, and their attitude and excitement to get better. You know, with Rusty retiring, we hired Mike Minnis from the Eagles, who, we had a pretty long search to replace Rusty because Rusty was so good, and we found a guy that I think really can help make a big difference in the team, and he's been outstanding. I know the players have been really receptive to what he's doing, and also exciting in the city. I mean, I want to wish the Pacers all the best of luck. Kevin, Chad, and Rick, they're all great people, and I think they've just done a tremendous job building, that organization and that team up to be a playoff contender, and I wish them all the best versus Milwaukee here starting out. And then, of course, the Fever getting Caitlin Clark. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to watch her play in our city, and she's a tremendous player. All right, fire away.
Chris Miller said back at the end of the season, like the rookie quarterback contract gives you some flexibility, avenues to do things differently. Does it do anything for you draft-wise?
I don't know draft-wise particularly. I mean, look, when you got a young quarterback, I've always thought, you got to protect him. All right, that's one, which I think we did a pretty good job last year, and I think we'll continue to do well. Tony's done a really good job with that group. We got a pretty talented group of O-linemen. You want to continue to add, playmakers around him. Being able to sign Pitt back, having, Jonathan now fully healthy coming into the offseason. He looks really good. I expect him to have a really big year. Putting more players around him is what you always want to do. Watching Downs take another step, have Pierce take another step. Those are going to be, important for us to have success.
I think you mentioned yards after the catch as something to add to the offense at other points this offseason. Is that just, when you guys look at the offense and everything?
Yeah, no, look, you always want a guy that can catch a hitch and go, or catch a shallow and, be able to make somebody miss. And then I think also, like a lot of the yards after catch, not only, from a make-a-miss run, but also from scramble plays. That's where a lot of them come from. Guys, all of a sudden the quarterback starts to move around. Guys break free and they're in space. Now it's harder to cover. The longer you got to cover, when you got guys that can run, it allows them to free up. I thought you even saw it some with Gardner this year. Times when he would start running around, we'd hit a shot, after the catch just because of his ability to run around. But look, you're always looking for guys that are dangerous with the ball in their hands.
Chris, how do you view, when you look at players, offense or defense, weighing like being an elite maybe at one thing or being good at multiple different things? Like, how much do you weigh that throughout the draft? Like, elite talent in one area versus, okay, they can do multiple different things at a high level.
No, that's a good question because, look, there's no perfect player. They all got a hole, every one of them. Somewhere. There's no perfect, ready-made player. They all have strengths and they all have weaknesses. So what you want to do is, okay, this is what he does really well. Let's put him in that role to do that specific thing really well. And I think in the draft, that's one thing you're looking at. And that's one thing we're meeting with our coaches today and tomorrow. And we just had a long discussion about a couple guys. I'm not going to tell you what side of the ball, but, what's the vision for the player? Like, it's easy for scouts and us to have a vision, but the coaches got to have the same vision, and we've got to be able to see the thing of how we're going to end up developing and what role this guy's going to play. And then if he does have some deficiencies, okay, what are the things he does really well and how we're going to use him to allow him to do those things really well?
What's the, very open-ended question, but what's the biggest pitfall do you think, whether individually or as teams, that you got to avoid in the draft?
That's a good question. It's a deep one. we could probably spend some time on that one. Character is always who they are is important. Okay, and look, we're dealing with young men here that are young men that are not fully developed into men yet. We're talking about 20, 21, 22-year-old young men that make mistakes, okay? And I can live with some of those mistakes. But to me, the things that when they fail is if they don't love to play the game. I think we've all, and y'all have done this long enough, you've been around players that maybe are not fully mature off the field, but on the field, they love football, so they're going to do everything in their power to get better. So I think and it's the hardest part to figure out. Like, character is the hardest. Time and money. How are they going to handle their time because they've got more of it, and how are they going to handle their money? And then the outside influences that are grabbing on them. I think sometimes we forget that these young men have a lot of people that all of a sudden you're playing in the NFL, you're playing professional sports that are coming out of the woodworks to grab at them. So they got to be, and we're asking them to do it at a young age. Now, I think we do a really good job. David Thornton is outstanding. David does a tremendous job connecting with not only the player, but their family and who's in their circle. So that, we could go in a million ways there of what you try to avoid. The hardest thing is getting the character right. That's the hardest thing. And there's a lot of times we'll pass on guys in the draft, and I know people freak out. Why? Well, there's usually something we found out or didn't like that, we ended up passing. It wasn't a good fit for us. It might be a good fit for somebody else, and they might make it work, but for us, it wasn't.
Chris, you talked about not giving Gus enough back in January. You really haven't done anything outside the building on defense. Any reason behind that?
Well, a lot of it is what's available, okay, and circumstances were available. I think getting Dallas Flowers back will help. All right, so I think probably when looking back on it, when I made that statement, the injury part of it played into it, and then we gave them a bunch of rookies. Well, now they're no longer rookies anymore. I mean, Jalen Jones is no longer a rookie. Juju's no longer a rookie. Dallas Flowers, we're hoping to get back healthy. We got back Kenny, back in the mix, which I think everybody in the grand scheme of things would tell you he's one of the top nickels in the league. It's not like these guys don't have enough talent. Do we want to add some more? Of course. We always want to add competition. But I think what we did is we gave them a bunch of young players, with not a lot of vet presence back there, other than Kenny and probably Julian.
Are you worried you're too young?
No, not anymore. I think they've grown up, and I think it's been fun to watch them. I mean, look, once you play 16, 17 games in this league, you've grown up to the fact where you're no longer a rookie. So I think we'll see better play out of them. And I didn't think it was, it's kind of like the ass whipping y'all gave the O-line 2 years ago, and y'all just, O-line sucks and can't play. I kept going, man, the second half of the season, I didn't think it was that bad. There were some individual moments, of course, but I thought they got better as they played. I thought they got better as they played. And I think they'll continue to get better.
Hey, Chris, timing is everything, and the timing of this offseason had you spending a lot of your money on keeping guys back, right? Just because of that timing, was it always destined that this draft was going to be maybe more important than others in terms of getting help right now because you can't go out and hire new help right now?
Well, I think anytime you draft, look, the majority of your best players on your team, you hope they come from the draft, okay? When you're building through free agency, I think y'all know my philosophy on this, and I think you can look through the league. When you build through, you can't get all your best players through free agency. Too expensive, and it doesn't last over time. I think the draft's always important to get. I think now in today's football, these guys got to come in and play. They do. They got to come in and play. And I think a lot of that, I think a lot of them are more ready to play probably than they were in the past for whatever reason. Like the one thing I'm blown away with talking to some of these really young guys is their football intelligence and knowledge of the game. Like, man, you talk to a kid from, I'm just grabbing a school, but Georgia on defense. Kirby and that group, they know defensive football. They know it as well as anybody. They have been schooled at a very high level that translates to this level. So I think to answer your question, Greg, I think every draft's important to get guys you got to get 2 or 3 guys. You'd like all of them to hit and help you right away. I know that's not real, but you need to get those guys to be able to play and make an impact.
How much of your thinking along the same lines you're not drafting for just today. These
No.
guys, you need them to produce primarily 3-4 years from now to backfill your team. How much of the philosophy is about today versus tomorrow? And I know coaches got to coach today, so their philosophy is different, but you got to think long term.
It's always that. I mean, I think that's the general coaching, scouting, tug and pull that you get, where you'll have, we're looking at, okay, 2 years from now, this guy's up, we'll draft this guy to replace him, and then, and then on the coaching end, like, hey, screw that, man, I need today. No, it's definitely a balance. It's a balance.
You re-sign, a lot of your re-signs now match up timeline-wise, like 2026, right in that area. Was that specific, anything to do with Anthony's contract, or was that
A little bit, and a little bit just how it kind of worked out. And these guys they're all kind of in their primes. And so it's a little different when you're signing a 24-year-old, like when we signed Kenny the last time. I think Kenny was 22, 23, really young. All right, so we did a little longer deal. The shorter deal is more, their age. They're right in their prime. I think it's and I think you're seeing it across the league. I mean, it's a little bit of a league trend. You're not seeing quite as long of deals as you did in the past. You're not seeing those 6-year contracts much we used to.
Where do you see the prime kind of typically ending for a player age-wise?
Oh, that's a little luck. I always tell guys, you play 4 years in a league, that's a hell of a career. I mean, social media and that brainiac of a world will criticize a guy for that, but like, this is the elite of the elite, and it is hard to have a long career. It is. It's just hard. It's a hard game. It's hard on your body. And when you need a little luck, you got to have some freak physical traits. There's some guys that are just freak physical. Like, I'll never forget in Chicago when we signed Julius Peppers, and everybody criticized us at 30, and at 38, he still looked good. And I think Buck's got a little of that in him. Like, where Buck's you stood next to him. I mean, God gifted him a little bit different. So Buck's probably going to be able to play as long as physically he wants to play. So I think it's a different case of what they have physically in their body to get a little luck with the injuries. I mean, I think every case is a little bit different.
Chris, a year ago at this time, you weren't positive yet who your quarterback would be. Now, obviously, that you understand that player. Does that change anything about the type of players you get around him on offense, or maybe the urgency to get certain positions?
I don't know if it's urgency to get certain positions as much. It is a good feeling knowing that we like him, we like what we saw and where we're going with him. Like I said, protect. Block and protect. It's one of the most, like, you just look through the league, you just look through the playoff teams. I mean, they all can block and protect. So I think that's critical. I think that's one. I remember Andrew used to tell me all the time, Chris, just make sure let's get me protected. I'll get the ball. Get me guys that'll catch it and get to the right spot, and I'll make the rest work. Most of the really good ones, that's how they kind of roll. Of course they want, do you want the superstar out there? Absolutely. But protection, to me, is always first and foremost.
You freed up a bunch of cap space with Buck's extension. How do you see the cap? Why did you structure it that way?
Just to make Twitter go nuts. Think I'm kidding? I'm not. Just want to see the reaction.
Chris, how does
Nothing beyond Twitter? Nothing beyond Twitter?
That's my answer. I mean, yeah.
You want flexibility?
Yeah, it gives us flexibility. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it gives
we
us
have to put up the
flexibility.
Twitter fire.
No, I know. It just gives us flexibility. Yes.
Go ahead.
Chris, having a year with Shane now and kind of seeing that proof of concept of what he wants out of his players, how does that impact the draft evaluation process with him?
Oh, it's really good because it makes it. I mean, like when you go in there and you start looking at players together, and then when he starts looking at the board and okay, this is how I use this guy, this is how he fits. Man, from a GM perspective, that's a beautiful thing now, knowing that he's got a vision quickly for the player, and it's not a vision of negativity with many guys where he sees the strengths really quickly and will figure out a role for how this guy can play for you. And that's fun. That makes it fun.
How many, if you want to share first round grades, do you have?
Oh God, I just left the freaking room too. Why don't y'all come on in? I'll let y'all look at it. I want to say we had 19 to 21, right in that area.
You mentioned whiteout back at the combine. Anything else stand out to you depth-wise after you?
It's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few positions that's got some real depth. Like the O-line in this draft is really it's excellent. You know, there's depth throughout. I mean, I truly believe you're going to get a really good player in those mid rounds and even some later because of the depth of the group. And wideout's very similar. It is an excellent. Those two position groups stand out. They're both really good.
Was there anything that stuck out to you about your board this year, whether it's like bigger than normal because of the players that are around longer or even smaller?
I'll say this. I do think you're going to see a lot of offensive players taken early, in the first round. And I'm not saying it's a weak defensive draft, but it is a really strong offensive draft, especially at the top of it.
And Chris, has your draft philosophy or your evaluation philosophy changed or evolved in the last 7-8 years?
Yeah, I think I'm growing. I mean, yeah, in a lot of ways. I mean, longer you do this, I mean, even scouting or longer you do it, you hope you can grow and figure out, who are the ones that, I mean, you're always looking for unique talent, unique traits in a player. But then also on the flip side of that, making sure the character's always been very important with us, without question. But making sure that we're drafting not only the unique traits, but also some substance with it with the tape. Now, we've always been pretty consistent with that, but, I mean, there's times you'll take a chance. And then I know where you're getting at, because we're going to trade back, and I can already see the article.
I mean, well, to that point, you have always stressed the value of picks and have, looked for ways to get more picks. Is your roster at a different place? I don't know how many roster spots there are.
Yeah, that's a good point. History. I mean, I just go off history. And, the more picks you have, the better chance you have to hit. Now, of course, you're not going to hit on all of them, but it gives you more of a chance to hit. Look, we've moved up. We moved up for Jonathan Taylor. Like, when we see one that's in striking distance that we think we can go get, we'll do it. But it's got to work out. Like, always, and then you got to have two that want to make, you got to have somebody that wants to make the trade.
It's always most expensive to do that in the first round, obviously. Could you see yourself actually considering a move up in the first?
Well, I just said probably move back. I don't know. I think it would depend. There would have to get somebody within striking distance that we felt really was unique and a difference maker for us. Yeah.
This is Drew OBrien back with you guys.
Yes, he is. He's back. Correct.
We haven't talked yet about Charlie Partridge. He's got a long history of developing some big-name guys. What can you tell us about him?
Excited about Charlie. Been watching it. He was at Wisconsin years ago. That's where I didn't get to know him well, but I know Coach Alvarez spoke just glowingly about him as a teacher and as a coach. And, actually a few years ago, we actually reached out to him, and he's very principle-centered man. Like, he wasn't leaving Pittsburgh. He had given their commitment, which in today's world is very unique. And I admire. But you just look at his history of developing players and his ability to make them better. I mean, and I'm not talking about like average ones either. I'm talking about unique, from J.J. Watt to kids that Hendrickson that's playing in Cincinnati. I mean, this guy's coached some really good players, and they all tell you He's one of the best ones they've had. So we're excited to get him. He's been great to work with and fun to work with, and got a great eye for it. So it'll be fun to get him. I know it's the first week with the guys with him. And coaching's coaching in my mind. Like high school, college. I mean, there's good coaches at every level. Like it doesn't matter where level you're at. You can do it at any level. There's high school coaches, I promise you, that will come into our league and be perfectly damn good football coaches, man.
Just one quick follow-up on OBrien, without getting into detail. I mean, are you comfortable with
Yes.
what you've learned there?
Yes.
And you can move forward?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Absolutely comfortable with it.